Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday Meeting, the weekly show where we discuss World of Warcraft. If you have ideas for topics, let me know in the comments below. My name is Tuskeh, and in this video we will be discussing the difficulty of LFR, or rather, the lack of it. Is LFR too easy? That's the question of the day, really. So when I first stepped into the LFR Siege of Orgrimmar, I was actually quite nervous. You know, I hadn't played the game in quite a while. I think I hadn't been playing since probably early Throne of Thunder days, and I'd taken a break. I played some other games. I think I played some Star Wars: The Old Republic and Guild Wars 2, something like that. And then I came back shortly after the Siege of Orgrimmar was released. I think that was the case. But I hadn't played the game for a while. Things had changed, because remember in Mr. Pandaria, Blizzard was still doing the whole changing classes mid-expansion thing. And I was worried that, you know, I wouldn't be able to pull my weight in this LFR, in this big Siege of Orgrimmar place. And I was very worried that, you know, the group would wipe a lot, there'd be a lot of whining and ranting, because I had done LFR in the Throne of Thunder, and it was a bit of a nightmare, and I was worried that it was going to be the same there. And there'd be loads of wipes, and that I didn't know the mechanics, and I actually watched all of Fat Boss's videos for normal and heroic. This was when heroic is mythic now, about every single boss. Before I even stepped into the first wing of LFR, I watched every single one of their guides I could to try and figure out the mechanics, figure out, okay, I'm gonna have to do this, and this. But as it turns out, Siege of Orgrimmar LFR wasn't nearly as nasty as I thought it was. I felt like I'd kind of wasted my time watching all those guides, only to find that, you know, half of the mechanics don't exist, or they don't even become a problem. And I will say that watching the Fat Boss guides did help after LFR, but I kind of did actually end up making the LFR guides because A, they didn't exist, and B, wipes could happen in the Siege of Orgrimmar LFR, and I mean, it was really a case of people just making silly, stupid, simple mistakes. You know, really simple mistakes, like I'm standing in fire for 10 minutes. Or, you know, I'm standing in the middle of everything, or I haven't moved, or there's a dinosaur and it stepped on me. All kinds of things like that. And despite all of that, despite the fact that it was quite easy and that you occasionally could wipe, yes, but generally, if you had a few competent people, you'd be fine, it did still feel like raiding. Not particularly heavy raiding, kind of like pseudo-raiding, baby's first raiding, I've heard a lot of people call it, and I think that actually has a lot of applications to describing the Siege of Orgrimmar LFR. But it still felt like raiding. It was really easy, but it did still feel like raiding. And I went and then I did all of the 4 wings, and the place felt very big, both in terms of the scale of the place because of the architecture. I mean, it was very big. And the number of bosses, there were a lot of bosses in there. And I mean, Garrosh could be quite a problem for a lot of LFR groups. And some mechanics could kill you. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that the gear that dropped was very similar to raiding gear. It had the same models, the same names, the same tier bonuses, just had Raid Finder on it instead of normal or heroic. I don't think that mattered to a lot of people. But I just want to pause for a second and compare that with my first time in Highmaul looking for raid. Now, I'd like to start by saying that I've only done Wing 1 of Highmaul. That's the only one I've done. I haven't had the time to do Wing 2 because I've just been so bloody busy. But, like I said, I haven't done the second wing. The first wing felt different, let's say, to the Siege of Orgrimmar. Now, I wasn't nearly as nervous because I had much more experience under my belt, and unlike before, I hadn't taken a break, and I was just ready to go in. I'd done the mechanics already on normal mode, and I'd beaten the bosses, so I was pretty prepared for having to actually think tactically, prepare for wipes and all that kind of stuff. And really the only nerves I had were that, you know, we'd make terrible mistakes and that it would take forever. But turns out all of that worry was for naught, because the mechanics were practically non-existent. I mean, Kargath, let's just look at the bosses in order now, for the first wing anyway. Kargath does the chain mechanic for you. Now, if you didn't know this, in normal mode, heroic mode, and mythic, he will pick the 5 closest people to him. So you actually have to say, all right, everyone run out except these 5 people. They run in. And I mean, that's not that difficult to do. I mean, I can understand how it would be a bit difficult on LFR, but he just does that for you. He just picks the people for you, just randomly, except for the tank. He picks the one with the highest impale stacks, and then he throws them into the crowd. But you don't even need to go into the crowd, because the ads do no damage. They barely do anything. So not only does the chain hurl mechanic do it for you, but it doesn't even need to exist. And then, there are no pits for you to drop in. They're all closed. You can't drop into any of the pits and die. I mean, it's not that difficult to see a great big pit of death. You just don't go into it. And like I said, you don't even need to really kill any of the ads, and you don't even really need to kite him. I've seen people just stand there and take it, and the healers can heal through it because it's not too bad. The last few ticks can get nasty, but that's like the only nasty thing in the entire LFR. If you stand there and take 20 seconds of him hitting you in the face, that's it. Going on to the Butcher, his main mechanic doesn't even exist. The whole idea of the Butcher is that you have to coordinate your groups around him to share the cleave stacks so they don't get too high and instantly kill a group, or they don't get so high that the healers can't keep up. And on the Butcher on LFR, he will kill you if you reach 10 stacks, but he only does 8 or 9, and then he resets them after he does his Bounding Cleave. He doesn't actually have enough time, and this is the only way I've seen someone die on the Butcher, right? He knocks everyone back, and all the range spread out, and then he charges one of them at random and kills them, and that's it. That's the only way I've seen someone die. And in a group of 25 people, that doesn't matter. So that's it. That's his only real mechanic, and it doesn't exist on LFR. So it's literally just he's a massive training dummy. And finally, Bracken Spore's moss, it isn't even an issue. Like, the green kind of creeping moss on the ground, it moves so slow that it only really became noticeable once he was at about 10% health. And normally, he'd be at 90% health when it got to that point, on normal or heroic at least. The flamethrowers are completely pointless, and the mushrooms are not required to succeed. You know how I said that the moss only really became noticeable when he was at 10% health? We hadn't used any mushrooms. We'd used like 5 seconds of a blue mushroom, and that was it. For those of you that don't know, the blue mushrooms give you a haste bonus that is required to beat the enrage timer that is the creeping moss, at least on normal and heroic. But on LFR, it just doesn't exist. It seems like Blizzard have just said to themselves, LFR is not raiding, let's make it so easy that you could sleep through it. And I've seen people do that. I've seen people on every single boss just running around on their mounts, and it doesn't matter. As long as a few people are paying attention, it doesn't matter. Not even that, as long as you're doing a rotation, as long as the tanks hold aggro, as long as the healers heal, the most basic of things that you can learn, you know, leveling up from 1 to 60. As long as you do those things, you're pretty much fine. And I know it sounds like I'm complaining, and I kind of, in a way, I am. I'm just kind of ranting, but I'm really trying to figure out if this lack of difficulty is a good or a bad thing. Because, I mean, on the one hand, it's good, right? That Blizzard have pushed towards the mindset of LFR is not raiding. I mean, not only is it stupidly easy to the point of there's no challenge, which, of course, is the whole point of raiding, but also, gear that drops isn't tier gear. I mean, not that we can get tier gear right now anyway, but when the Blackrock Foundry opens, which should hopefully be sometime in the next couple months, not only does that stuff drop tier gear on normal and heroic, but it won't drop it on LFR. Like, LFR will never drop tier gear again, hopefully. I mean, even in the expansions to come, that is if LFR continues to exist in the expansions to come. And like I said, it's good that LFR, and not only that, but the gear itself is actually worse by a long shot. I mean, it looks worse, doesn't even share the same models, doesn't have the same names, and the stats are just terrible, but it really makes raiding feel special, and I like that fact. I like the fact that raiding should be something special. It should be something to aspire to, not something that everyone can go and do, just whenever they want, just by pressing a button, and it's super easy here, have your epics. That the people who put in all this time and effort, you know, kill Garrosh after 100 attempts, scream into the microphone, really happy, you get the same rewards as them. No, I don't think that that should be the case. I'm not saying that LFR shouldn't exist, and I'm not saying that these people should, you know, just be left out to dry. I don't believe that. But it's really good that raiding feels special again. All that said, on the other hand, what about people that either can't raid, don't want to raid, or still believe LFR is raiding? I mean, let's just go through those in reverse order. For the people that believe LFR is still raiding, this is kind of a rude awakening for them. And really, it's very easy to understand that this isn't raiding. Raiding is all about the challenge. It's all about going up against massive bosses, having a challenge, working as a team to beat them. And this is not that. It's not even slightly that. You need no teamwork to do this. In the Siege of Orgrimmar, you required a bit of teamwork, but here it's just nothing. Just nothing. And for those people that believe LFR is raiding, this is a wake-up call, and hopefully it will make them realize that either they don't want to raid, or they do want to raid and they'll get out of LFR. For the people who don't want to raid, then LFR will probably work well for them. If they want to raid but be lazy, then they're doing it wrong, I'm afraid. There isn't really any way you can say, I want to raid, and I also want to be lazy and do no work, because that is not what raiding is about. That's like saying, I want to do really well in this school class, let me do nothing and do no revision, let me just wing the whole thing. It's very, very unlikely that you'll do well. You have to put work into it. You have to research the fights, you have to research your class, you have to research the team you're with, figure out what works and what doesn't, and then you can start succeeding. LFR, of course, is not that. And people that don't want to raid, fine. If they want to be lazy and raid, sorry, that cannot happen. And I'm kind of glad that LFR is teaching them that. And for the people that can't raid, this is where the real problem lies. I mean, if you've got a schedule that means that you can't play the game for more than a couple of hours a day, or even a week, or something like that, then that's fair, you can't raid. I mean, you could, but it's very unlikely that you'll do well or that you'll even get into a guild that will allow you to do that. And not only that, but what about people that can't raid because they don't have the skill or the confidence? I know lots of people in my guild who, you know, this is a social guild that I'm in. We have a raid team, yes, but they're kind of a little group by themselves, which can be problematic, but that's not this topic. But the people that aren't in that raid team have said they might want to raid, but they're just not confident enough. Maybe they have some kind of anxiety disorder or all kinds of different things. They could just be an anxious person, you know? And I know people that have gotten nervous and panicked in looking for raid Siege of Orgrimmar. I haven't heard of that in Highmaul, which I suppose is a good thing, but really those people have a place to go in LFR, and it did have some kind of meat to it that allowed them to get some satisfaction from a kill, but that doesn't exist anymore, and I don't really know if that's good or bad. I mean, I think that's bad, but I might just be... I mean, this is all subjective. I mean, I'm never going to say that I'm right. It's just my opinion. That's what you're here for, right? That's what the Monday meeting is for. If you want to be objective, go and watch Serious Face, which will be up on Wednesday. But that's my point. It just seems like Siege of Orgrimmar was, let's say that heroic mode Siege of Orgrimmar was 100% raiding, and normal mode was 50% raiding. Looking for raid was 10% raiding, right? It was still a percent of raiding. Nowadays, it's like Mythic is 100%, Heroic is 60%, Normal is 40%, and LFR is 0%. There is no difficulty, there is nothing, there's no satisfaction. It's just a case of go in, get your Abrogator Stones, get your Epics, go. And I will actually say this, I'm really unhappy about the fact that you can get Abrogator Stones from looking for raid. And I just want to stop for a second and before you all say, oh, you don't think people who don't raid should get the Legendary. I don't believe that. I think that's perfectly fair. What I do think is that raiders should not have to say, okay, I've cleared Highmaul on normal or heroic or whatever, now I have to go and do it on LFR to get another shot of the Abrogator Stones. That just seems terrible to me. Now, I'm not entirely sure how Abrogator Stones work. Can't seem to find too much information about it, but it doesn't really matter too much. My point is, and hopefully this is the case, if it is, then you can disregard this, but if it's not, then I have a problem with it. Is that, like I said, it's not fair for a raider to have to say, I have to go and do this LFR, which I don't want to do, to get my Abrogator Stones to be helpful in a raid, in my raid team, on progression. I don't think that that should work. I think it should be Abrogator Stones on one lockout. Like, you can only get Abrogator Stones from one lockout, and then any other lockout you do that week, you don't get them. So, for instance, if you cleared Highmaul on normal, and you got all your Abrogator Stones from the bosses, because you get at least one or two from each. So let's say you did that, and then you went into LFR, or Heroic, or even Mythic, and you did them again, you wouldn't get any more Abrogator Stones. Sure, it would take longer, but that could have been tweaked, but I just don't think that it's fair for people who don't want to go into LFR to have to go into LFR, just so that they can help their raid team by gearing up. I don't like that. And not only all of this stuff, but unfortunately, and this one's kind of a bit selfish of me, the fact that LFR is now so easy kind of leaves my guides with no reason to exist. The LFR guides were what started me on this channel, and it what really kind of bumped it into, I won't say the limelight, into my own little spotlight, like in a corner. You know, it's the old dusty spotlight that flicks on and off. That's me. And the LFR guides are what pushed me into that. And, I mean, they got a lot of views. They got loads and loads of views, and I was really happy about that. And I couldn't wait to do the new ones in higher quality with my better microphone, with great editing, loads of information. And it's just like, I go in there, and it's like, well, now it's completely pointless. There is no reason for it to exist. And that really annoys me. I mean, it really does. I'm gonna do them eventually, but it just doesn't feel like a priority because they're so easy. Now, there is an argument to be made that maybe it's so easy because so many people right now are raiders, and a lot of the raiders are doing LFR. And once the raiders don't need to do LFR anymore, it will get significantly harder because the quality of people in them will decrease, which is possible. And as horrible as this sounds, I kind of hope that, because I kind of hope they get it just a little bit harder, so people will start looking up guides and my guides will actually have a bit more relevance. Because, to me, the Siege of Orgrimmar LFR guides are very important to me, and they were at the core of my channel, and they mean a lot to me, but kind of sucks now that they feel a bit redundant. Not only because, obviously, the Siege of Orgrimmar doesn't exist anymore as LFR, well, not something you do regularly, and the LFR that you do actually do regularly is piss easy. So all that being said, if this first wing is anything to go by, is this a good thing? Now, as I said, I haven't done Wing 2, but if you have, I'd like to know in the comments, let me know how difficult you thought it was. If it was a step up from Wing 2, if there were any kind of mechanics that you thought were really nasty, that actually were able to wipe the group, anything like that, let me know, because I'm curious about it. But it brings up a question. If LFR is so easy, why does it even need to exist? And I mean, there are obviously answers to that, but why not just make normal mode a little bit easier and encourage pugging it? Because obviously Blizzard want to encourage pugs, and with this new group finder they've got, why not even have a normal mode dungeon finder like you do with the LFR? You just queue and you enter a normal mode. And I think that maybe that could be something. It could be an alternative, but LFR really exists because it provides an endgame for a lot of people, and that's why I think that LFR should continue to exist. It does raise the question, all this, of whether it should exist, but I hope it does continue to exist, because it's kind of this place that a lot of inexperienced players, maybe players who don't have a lot of time or who don't have the experience or are just bad. That's really the bottom line. Just players who aren't very good at the game, and it could provide some kind of endgame for them. I personally don't understand it, and I don't mean to be cruel to anyone out there who is struggling with World of Warcraft, but let's be frank. If you are someone who is listening to this video, who has gotten this far in the video, and you have watched all of this, and you've listened to all of this, and you're only doing LFR, if you're willing to listen to this, you have the potential to get better, and you have the potential to go into normal mode, and heroic mode, and eventually mythic. And that's my point. Most of the people who the LFR is an endgame for probably won't watch this video, and they probably won't even hear of my guides, even if they were 100% necessary. They probably wouldn't even heard of them. So, it makes me think, it's kind of like a place for those people to go, and it does provide an endgame for those who can't get fully into raiding or PvP or whatever else, and it does keep a lot of potential terrible players out of otherwise good teams, because a terrible player can drag down a team, which really sucks. But of course, it is also important to remember the past, because back in vanilla, raiding was a massively exclusive thing. Like, a lot of players didn't raid because they couldn't, because it was so difficult to raid. Just think about, for instance, if you wanted to do Naxxramas, right? And I wasn't a raider in vanilla World of Warcraft. This is just what I remember of the actual progression system. I never got into it. You'd have to gear up to the point where you could do the first raid, which I believe was, what was it? It was either Molten Core or Zul'Gurub. One of those two, but then you had to do that, get geared up in that. You need like a full set of that gear, and then do Molten Core, or either Zul'Gurub, one or the other, in either order. And then you'd have to do Blackwing Lair, and then you'd have to do Ahn'Qiraj, and then you'd have to do Ahn'Qiraj, the Temple of Ahn'Qiraj, because there were two, there was 20 and 40, the Ruins and Temple. You'd have to do the Ruins, get geared up in that, then the Temple, then get geared up in that, and then you could go into Naxxramas. Naxxramas, the endgame raid, was the only like 0.01% of the player base got to see it, which is why they brought it back in Wrath of the Lich King. And of course, Wrath of the Lich King maybe went a bit too far in the other direction, because really, it just let everyone get epics, I think, and that was a big problem. Kind of a different problem to what we face now, but it was a problem, and going too much in that direction is something Blizzard is very wary of, and rightfully so, in my opinion. So, it's very interesting to think of what the history of raiding was like. In my opinion, Cataclysm felt very good. It had the looking for raid near the end of it, which I'm not entirely sure was a good idea, especially with the loot system they had. I'm glad they introduced personal loot for LFR, otherwise it would have been a complete catastrophe. And really, I don't do LFR. I don't want to. If it means I get my Abrogator Stones a bit slower, fine. I don't want to do LFR because I hate the bloody thing. It's not raiding, it's just a waste of time, really. And I don't like it. Which really sucks, because they could have made it interesting in some kind of interesting way, or they could have just not had it exist, really. Which is a terrible shame. I'm really unhappy that I have to say that. But such is the case, I believe. Such is my opinion, and if you disagree, I'd really like to hear your opinions in the comments. So that's it for the Monday meeting. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions for future shows, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. As always, I offer my heartfelt thanks to those who contribute to the channel through the Patreon system, with special thanks going out today to John Dolan. You can find links to all of this stuff in the description. If you want to support the channel, I will offer my heartfelt thanks and a few rewards. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck with your gaming endeavours. Now, let's talk about your opener for a single target fight. Right before the pull begins, use Unleash Flame to buff yourself. Then, pre-pot, so use a Draenic Intellect Potion, and put down your Fire Elemental Totem. As the tanks go into attack, a second or so before the fight begins, start casting either Lightning Bolt or Elemental Blast, depending on if you have the talent. Not only that, but encouraging other players to do the same in your guild and your raid team will help you dramatically. Running 5-mans as a team instead of pugging will help you so much in early Warlords of Draenor. And mixing up LFR pugs with a chunk of your raid team will help things go incredibly smoothly. The Titans, unaware of Sargeras' new Burning Legion, continued shaping worlds in their dream of order. Along their journey, they came across a small world. We call it Azeroth. Across its landscape were millions of elemental spirits, who worshipped beings that were older than even the Titans. These were called the Old Gods, and they were horrific creatures that represented nothing but disorder and chaos.